12 months ago, she was ranked number 140 in the world, clutching a wild card into the Miami Open like a lottery ticket she half expected to waste. Today, Alex Eala sits inside the top 30, and the tennis establishment still cannot fully explain how she got there this fast. What happened between those 2 points in time is one of the most compressed, electrifying ascents the WTA Tour has witnessed in years, and the 20-year-old from Quezon City is far from finished writing this chapter. Let me paint a picture for you. March 2025. The Hard Rock Stadium grounds in Miami are buzzing with the usual suspects, the usual storylines, the usual seeded favorites rolling through the early rounds. Nobody is talking about a 19-year-old Filipina who received a wild card courtesy of being a Rafa Nadal Academy product with a promising, but still modest professional record. Alex Eala was expected to show up, compete respectably, maybe pick up a round or two of experience, and head home with a little extra prize money. That was the script. She incinerated it. Round after round, she carved through established names with a composure that bordered on eerie. Jelena Ostapenko, the former French Open champion known for her relentless firepower, fell first. Then came Madison Keys, riding sky-high confidence after her Australian Open title, ranked 5th in the world, and Eala dispatched her with a clinical aggression that left courtside analysts scrambling to update their talking points. And then the quarterfinal against Iga Swiatek, the world number 2, the defending Miami champion. The player who had spent the better part of 3 years making opponents look helpless on hard courts. Eala beat her in straight sets, 6-2, 7-5, and the expression on Swiatek's face when that final return sailed long told you everything. Nobody saw this coming. Not the Polish star. Not the broadcasters. Not even Eala herself, who stood on court with her hand over her mouth, visibly stunned by what she had just accomplished. That semifinal run was not a fluke. It was a detonation. The kind of result that forces an entire sport to recalibrate its assumptions about a player overnight. Eala went from an interesting prospect to a legitimate threat in the span of 5 matches, and the roughly 390 ranking points she collected launched her from obscurity deep into the top 100. By the end of 2025, she had broken into the top 50 for the first time, closing the season at number 50 after a year that included her first Grand Slam main draw win at the US Open and her maiden WTA 125 title in Guadalajara. The Philippines had never produced anything remotely like this in professional tennis. Eala was not just making history for herself. She was building a road where none had existed before. But here is where the story gets genuinely interesting, because what happened next was not the smooth, triumphal continuation that a Hollywood screenwriter might have drafted. 2026 began with promise. Eala reached a career-high ranking of 49 heading into the Australian swing, then opened her season at the ASB Classic in Auckland with a gritty 3-set comeback over Donna Vekic, a former Grand Slam semi-finalist, rallying from a set down to win 4-6, 6-4, 6-4. She followed that with a convincing win over Magda Linette to reach the semifinals, where she pushed Wang Xinyu to 3 sets before falling 7-5, 5-7, 4-6 in a heartbreaker. No shame in that result. It showed she could compete with players in and around the top 20 on a weekly basis. Then came the Australian Open, and with it, the first cold slap of reality. Eala entered Melbourne Park for the first time as a main draw participant, riding a wave of Philippine national pride that had turned her into something between a sports hero and a cultural phenomenon back home. The atmosphere surrounding her first-round match was electric. Filipino fans filled the stands. Social media erupted. And then Alicia Parks turned the match on its head, coming back from a set down to defeat Eala 6-0, 3-6, 2-6. Just like that, her Grand Slam debut on Australian soil was over. It was a jarring reminder that momentum in tennis can evaporate in 20 minutes of bad returning. What made the loss particularly instructive was the nature of the collapse. Eala had taken the first set with authority, dictating play with her left-handed forehand and creating sharp angles that Parks struggled to neutralize. But as the American settled into the match and began redirecting Eala's pace with depth, The young Filipina's first serve percentage cratered, and her shot selection grew cautious at exactly the moments it needed to stay bold. This is the paradox that has defined so much of Eala's career to this point. When she trusts her instincts and plays with creative abandon, she can trouble anyone. When doubt creeps in, when the opponent wrestles away the initiative, she has sometimes struggled to find a secondary gear. But the revenge tour was already being loaded. Abu Dhabi in early February became a proving ground. Eala fought through a round of 32 win over Zeynep Sönmez, then produced one of the most dramatic matches of her career in the round of 16 against Alexandra Sasnovich. Down a double break in the deciding set, trailing 0-4, staring at the exit door, she reached into some reservoir of stubbornness and ripped off 6 consecutive games to win the match. That kind of comeback does not happen through talent alone. It requires a mental architecture that refuses to accept the scoreboard's verdict. Eala saved match point in that contest and later called the victory special, which felt like an understatement of almost comical proportions. The quarterfinal loss to Ekaterina Alexandrova in Abu Dhabi, 6-3, 6-3, was a clean defeat against a player in top form, and Eala took her lessons from it without public complaint. But the result in Dubai the following week demonstrated that she had absorbed those lessons in real time. Her second-round destruction of 6th-seeded Jasmine Paolini, 6-1, 7-6, was a statement match. Paolini, a world number 8 and one of the most improved players on tour, had no answers for Eala's variety. The Filipino left-hander mixed heavy topspin forehands with deft slices, changed the pace repeatedly, and made Paolini look genuinely confused about what was coming next. It was her third career top 10 victory, and arguably the most tactically sophisticated of the three. After dispatching Sorana Cîrstea in the third round at Dubai, 7-5, 6-4, to reach the quarterfinals for the second time at a WTA 1000 event, Eala ran into Coco Gauff. And here the pattern that has quietly haunted her 2026 season came into sharp focus. Gauff demolished her 6-0, 6-2, and the scoreline was not misleading. Eala was outclassed from the first point to the last, unable to find any rhythm against Gauff's relentless returning and court coverage. The American smothered every Eala serve, neutralized the angles before they could develop, and turned the match into a suffocating exercise in baseline dominance. This is the tactical puzzle that Eala's camp has been working to solve. Against opponents ranked in the teens and 20s, her game translates beautifully. The left-handed angles create natural discomfort. The variety keeps opponents off balance. The competitive fire carries her through tight moments. But against the very best players on tour, the ones who can absorb her best shots and redirect them with interest, Eala has sometimes looked like she is playing a different match. The 6-0, 6-2 loss to Gauff in Dubai was nearly identical to the scoreline she would suffer against Gauff at Indian Wells a few weeks later, and the common thread was clear. When an opponent can consistently take time away from Eala, when they can dominate the first serve return and force her into reactive positions, her game compresses. The shot selection narrows. The court shrinks. And yet, the Indian Wells tournament that followed told a more complex story than just the ending. Eala opened with a bye, then drew Dayana Yastremska, a former Grand Slam semifinalist, with a cannon of a serve and a willingness to go for broke on every swing. That match stretched past midnight in the California desert, and Eala won it 7-5, 4-6, 7-5, overcoming a 5-4 deficit in the third set by winning the final 3 games. The crowd was firmly behind her. The atmosphere was electric. And the resilience she showed in closing out that third set under immense pressure demonstrated something that does not show up in ranking points. It showed character that is still hardening. Then came the Gauff rematch. Eala was winning 6-2 and up 2-0 in the second set when Gauff retired with a left arm injury. It was an unsatisfying way to advance, but the tennis Eala had played before the retirement was exceptional. Her baseline discipline was immaculate. Gauff finished with 26 unforced errors against just 12 from Eala. Those numbers tell a story of patience, of a player who had clearly studied the Dubai loss and adjusted her approach. She was not trying to out-hit Gauff. She was trying to outthink her, to extend rallies, to wait for the right moment to accelerate. It worked. Whether it would have held up for a full match remains unknown, but the tactical growth was undeniable. The round of 16 brought Linda Noskova, and with her, the continuation of what Philippine tennis fans have grimly labeled the Czech curse. Noskova won 2-6, 0-6, and the match lasted barely an hour. Eala looked tight from the opening service game. Her first serve abandoned her completely, and she never found the competitive groove that had powered her through the earlier rounds. It was devastating, and it extended her record against Czech opposition to 0-12. 2 weeks later, at the Miami Open, the site of her fairy tale breakthrough 12 months earlier, Eala arrived as the 31st seed. No longer a wild card. No longer an unknown. The draw gave her Laura Siegemund in the second round, and that match became the longest of Eala's entire career. 3 hours and 20 minutes of chess-like baseline exchanges, with Siegemund's unorthodox rhythms testing every ounce of Eala's patience. She lost the first set in a tiebreak, 7-6 to Siegemund, and for a while it looked like the veteran's guile was going to suffocate the young Filipina's attacking instincts. But Eala regrouped. She started targeting Siegemund's movement, pulling her wider, making her cover more court, and ground out the next 2 sets 6-3, 6-3. It was an ugly win by aesthetic standards, but it was a mature one. The kind of win that says more about a player's development than any highlight reel. Magda Linette fell next, 6-3, 7-6, and then Sara Errani, the 37-year-old Italian legend, was dispatched 6-3, 6-1 in a match that showcased Eala at her flowing best. Against Errani, the variety was on full display. Drop shots that died on the line. Cross-court forehands that curved away from the Italian's backhand like they had minds of their own. Serve and volley approaches that Errani, one of the craftiest players in the history of the tour, simply could not read. It was a performance that made you lean forward in your chair and think, this player is going to win big tournaments. And then Karolina Muchova walked onto the court in the round of 16, and the Czech curse struck again. 6-0, 6-2. 60 minutes. A demolition. Muchova won 80% of her first serve points compared to Eala's 39%. She took 64% of first serve return points against Eala's 20%. The gap was not just in the numbers. It was in the body language. Eala looked beaten from the middle of the first set, and the brief resistance she showed in the second, holding serve in the 5th and 7th games, felt more like a reflex than a rally. The 0-13 record against Czech opponents is now a full-blown statistical anomaly, and it raises genuine tactical questions. Is it the flat, hard-hit style that Czech players tend to favor? Is it the way they take the ball early and deny Eala the time she needs to construct her points? Is it purely psychological at this point, a self-fulfilling prophecy that tightens her muscles before the match even begins? Probably some combination of all three. But whatever the cause, solving this puzzle is now the most clearly defined challenge in her development. Here is what matters, though, and what gets lost in the noise of back-to-back Czech defeats. Look at the trajectory. In 2024, Eala finished the year ranked 158. In 2025, she ended at 50. As of mid-March 2026, she reached a career high of 29, making her the highest-ranked Filipino in the history of the WTA Tour. Her win-loss record for the season stands at 14-8, and the quality of her wins, over Paolini, over Gauff in the retired Indian Wells match, over Yastremska, over Vekic, over Sursti, tells you that she belongs at this level. She is not borrowing time. She is not living off one magical week in Miami. She is consolidating. The off-court dimension of this story deserves attention too, because Eala has had to navigate something that almost no Filipino athlete has faced before at this scale. After the 2025 Miami breakthrough, she became a genuine celebrity in the Philippines. Her matches are broadcast nationally. Social media accounts dedicated to tracking her every result have hundreds of thousands of followers. Filipino communities around the world organize viewing parties for her matches. She has spoken candidly about struggling with this level of attention, admitting she was a little in denial about the fame and finding the adjustment to constant public scrutiny challenging. For a 20-year-old who left home at 13 to train at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca, who graduated from that academy's school program in 2023, who has essentially spent her formative years in airport terminals and practice courts, the sudden weight of national expectation is an entirely new kind of pressure. It is not the pressure of a break point at 5-all. It is the pressure of 60 million people watching and wanting you to represent something larger than tennis. Eala has handled it with a grace that belies her age. Her post-match press conferences are thoughtful and self-aware. She speaks about gratitude with sincerity rather than obligation. She acknowledges losses without making excuses and celebrates wins without arrogance. There is a composure to her public persona that feels earned rather than coached, and it has made her one of the most universally liked players on tour. Coco Gauff chose Eala as her doubles partner at the Italian Open, praising her as a killer in doubles and expressing genuine enthusiasm about teaming up. That kind of peer recognition matters. It says something about how the locker room views her, not just as a talent, but as a competitor and a person. The clay season beckons now. Eala is expected to open her clay campaign at the Linz Open in April, and while clay has not traditionally been her strongest surface, the left-handed angles that are her signature weapon should translate effectively to the slower courts. The ball sits up a little longer on clay, which could actually give her more time to construct the elaborate point patterns that make her so dangerous when she is playing with confidence. Her slice, which Kim Clijsters recently praised as a weapon that makes opponents very uncomfortable, should be even more effective on a surface where low-bouncing balls force opponents into awkward positions. But the real test of 2026 will be the French Open and Wimbledon. Can she translate the big match ability she has shown at WTA 1000 events into deep runs at Grand Slams? The first-round exit in Melbourne was a sobering reminder that the best-of-3 format at Slams offers no room for slow starts. She will need to find a way to bring her A-game from the first point of the first set, match after match, for 2 weeks straight. That is a different kind of endurance than what a WTA 1000 demands, and it is the frontier that separates very good players from great ones. What makes Alex Eala's story so compelling is not just the results. It is the specificity of her journey. She is not a product of a tennis factory nation with decades of infrastructure and dozens of predecessors to learn from. She is the first. The first Filipino to beat a top 10 player. The first to reach a WTA semifinal. The first to crack the top 30. Every milestone she reaches alone, without a roadmap drawn by compatriots who came before her. That isolation could be crushing. Instead, she has turned it into fuel. The revenge tour that began with her 2025 Miami explosion and has continued through the peaks and valleys of early 2026 is not revenge against any particular opponent. It is revenge against the assumption that a player from the Philippines, a country with no professional tennis tradition, cannot compete at the highest level of the sport. Every match she wins, every ranking she climbs, every top 10 scalp she collects is an answer to a question that was never asked aloud, but always lingered in the margins. Can she really do this? She can. She is. And the most exciting part is that at 20 years old, with her game still evolving, her mental resilience still hardening, and her tactical understanding still deepening, the ceiling remains wonderfully, tantalizingly unknown. The revenge tour is not over. It might just be getting started.